decided that we would take the parachute on our bicycles to Sayville to the courthouse, because that was the most legal place that we could find. We carried the parachute down here, down the street to the courthouse. Went in and told the story about finding it, and we were told, that's fine, just leave it right here. Now, what happened to that parachute, I have no idea, but that's as close as we really came to war.
So, again, looking at Suffolk County News for that time, it is interesting that we can start to see. Well, one thing to mention is that Mitchell Field was built during the war, so that Dick Wolf, the first speaker there, his recollections are correct, that there were activities at Mitchell Field at the time, but it did happen a few times, so there are documented articles. This is from the Suffolk County News. April 28th, paratroopers make surprise landing here. June 9th, Sayville sees paratroopers maneuvers. June 30th, MacArthur Field is scene of maneuvers. It was a whole war games. They had planes flying up from North Carolina that were dive bombing and strafing Mitchell Field. They dropped a smoke screen cover, and then they would drop these paratroopers on the golf courses, and they would have to install howitzers and unpack all the equipment. They had Boy Scouts helping them get the stuff left over at the end. Here's another one, August 4th. This one was delayed by fog. So you can see that there's a number of them, and I have some of the articles here. I just wanted to mention a few things. One is from the April 28, 1944, and Jack, you listen to this and tell me if you recognize any of these people. It does say, the sky was colored with green, red, yellow, and white chutes as the men and equipment floated down. A few were carried a little beyond the field into a line of trees, but there was no casualties except for minor injuries. A parachute was found by Howard Reeves and Roy Arata Jr. after the maneuvers were over. Was taken to the courthouse by then. Army authorities at Mitchell Field, notified by police at the courthouse, picked up the chute on Tuesday. I don't know if you know those two.
They were imposters in our group.
But the chute did get back to its rightful owner. So.
Credit.
But again, it is interesting to see that there was all this activity. And some of these were fighters from Mitchell Field, but some of them, again, came from bases in North Carolina. And so this was a whole planned mock maneuvers getting them ready for war. So I don't know how many people know that story. That was new to me. And one of the accounts actually says that movies were taken of the event. I guess the Army was filming it, so it would be interesting to see if there are anywhere films of Sayville Golf Course with all these people landing. And he mentions, our first speaker mentioned two dairies that were active in West Sayville and Oakdale. Roy, did you
I remember both of them.
Okay. One was Bentama.
Bentama, as a child, I adopted a purebred Jersey calf from the Bayard cuttings before it became an arboretum. And when she was bred artificially with bulls from Cornell, and when she was ready to have her calf the first time, Ed Bentama came down to help deliver it.
So again, we have another set of clips about the old sort of agricultural landscape. But in Sayville itself, there were so many dairies. I think there were some on Broadway. And if you saw, there was a display up recently in the lobby of bottles that had a lot of the original dairy bottles. I think the South Shore Dairy was the Bentama one. And then,
Well, the necessity of farm is where the Oakdale shopping center.
okay. And so you can see there was this big open land, and so you can see why the Army would say, okay, we're going to drop our parachutes on that. This next set of interviews is sort of, I group these under the rubric of just sort of different glimpses of the war. Because again, each person is living in a different place. And you might have noticed by now that we've expanded our definition of Long Island. We're doing geographically, so if we meet someone from Brooklyn or Queens, we're considering them part of the Long Island home front. So that's why we're getting some of the stories from them as well. So this is some stray different mentions of what people saw?
We had a neighbor next door who, we were at war with Italy at the time, but they had prisoners of war here in New Jersey at one of the camps. I can't remember the name. And they were allowed to take the prisoners of war home for dinner on a Sunday. So this Italian family would go there and take the maybe 3 or 4 fellas and bring them home and then bring them back. So it was that kind of a time.
There was an article in the paper about that you could go to see a captured German submarine in New York Harbor on the North River. But you had to provide the access fee was a 25-pound bag of newspapers. So my mother and I did the carrying, and we carried the 25-pound bag of newspapers to the bus on Hillside Avenue and Springfield Boulevard, got the Q1 into Jamaica, got the subway to Jamaica, which took us into Manhattan, and then we went across uptown on the north side, and we walked across to the ship where the captured German submarine was. It was the best thing. That 25 pounds was really worth the effort of carrying it, because I was actually on a German submarine.
I don't know, because I was still 10, 11 years old, but I do remember seeing lights coming from the north, which maybe was part of what has become MacArthur Airport, and those lights kind of frightened me. I wondered why these searchlights were going through the sky, and to this day I don't know exactly why, but it could have been part of the defense program for Long Island.
Here on Long Island, there was a fake gas station that we used to go take a ride and look. I think it was, I would say Farmingdale area, with Levittown area, I don't, somewhere, I don't know where it was, but in that area. And I remember going by there, and the fake gas station really was a cover for an underground war plant of some kind. Now, we all knew this. Now, how come nobody else knew this? But, you know, so if you were flying over in an enemy plane, you would see this gas station. But we knew that the people walking into the gas station really were going underground. Now, what big operation could be under that gas? I don't know. But I remember this. So as children, this is something that really impressed us. It was like really. Also,
Do you have a sense of where that rumor, or where you got that information from, or was it just sort of?
no, I don't know. It was like common knowledge. I mean, you want, let's go look at the fake gas station. Okay, so I mean, you know, God forbid, maybe it really wasn't a fake gas station. Maybe it was a story that we were told.
A friend down the block, his father had an antenna that was probably 20 stories high. And he was doing secret work for the government, but he couldn't get too much about it. He could talk to Europe with this telephone tower, this radio tower he had. He was doing all kinds of communications, so he's really involved in the war effort and doing things for the government.
So again, you can see a lot of, when we do these oral histories, we're getting the people's lived experiences, what they felt, what they experienced. We're not fact-checking them. We're not saying, oh, wait, that can't be true. I have a date here that does. It's to get them to tell their story. And as children, think back to your own block and the legends that you grew up with of your neighborhood and things like that. So these are all things that we captured because it shows you what people were thinking at the time, what stories they were telling, what rumors they were telling. You know, some mentioned the German spies. This actually did land, I think, in Amagansett that were captured on the way to New York City. So these things were happening. So you can see how rumors could spread or different stories can come up if there's an old house or an abandoned place or something like that. So it is interesting to see these things turning up in the talks. Jack, did you ever go into that gas station?
No.
Okay.
And I picture in my mind of sitting in the car and looking out.
Okay.
But again, it's just an absurd story that's hard to believe that
When we look at Camp Hero, when we look at the work that maybe Grumman was doing, or the different aircraft, they were creating secret, probably military equipment. So that kind of secrecy is not far-fetched, and then you could spin that into a lot of different things. I have one more series of clips that I'm gonna play, and then I'm gonna ask, I've been talking to a few people, if they would come up after these clips, and we'll do some recordings, just so they can share the stories that we've been sort of unearthing today while we're here. This last one, we've been talking a little bit about how we're getting glimpses of the island. So a lot of these are people that grew up in the Depression, were born in the Depression. So their earliest memories are from a time before World War II and before the boom that came after when all the GIs came home. So there are these memories of what the island was like back then. So I call this a clip of things that don't exist anymore.
But they had oyster shells in the Second World War, from Atlantic Avenue to West Avenue,
This is Dick Wolf.
which is pretty long, about a whole acre, 3-4 rows of oysters, maybe 20 feet high, between the whole blocks. And that's where the town would come in with a backhoe, a payloader, and a dump truck, fill it up, go give the guys a driveway, pave the roads, and they still kept piling up. The bay was loaded.
What was it like driving over an oyster paved road?
Smooth. They crush it to a powder immediately. As soon as you drive over them, they just crush. And they keep packing. Very smooth. At first it's dusty, but after it rains a few times, it's like riding on a concrete road. And no seams or nothing. Very nice. But the amount of oysters come out of that bay.
We were really just surrounded by farms and fields. And in the summer months, the only way we could get some money was to go out and pick string beans.
East Mauritius.
And my mother took me out, I remember, just off Hampstead Turnpike. And she threw a blanket out, so we had no babysitters. She put me underneath a tree with a bottle, and she went out and picked string beans. And I had to pick string beans when I was 6 years old. And I remember when we picked those string beans, they gave us 10 cents a bushel. I couldn't believe it, 10 cents a bushel. You'd get up in the morning, and I was a little guy, and the plants were so wet from the dew from the night before. You were soaking wet. In the middle of the day, you were burning from the heat, the spiders all over your back. There was no water to drink. You had to go to the farmer's barn to get water. So it was a very trying period.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit more about Mount Sinai during those years? So there were farms and...
Oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Very country, all the cows. Randall's farm, as they said, was the dairy farm. And with my growing up here over the years, all my children played over there. My grandchildren played over there. And I had the pigs, the chickens, the ducks in the bedroom. Janie had ducks and kept them in the bedroom until I couldn't stand them any longer. And we had all the beautiful wild animals out here. You had your chipmunks, your rabbits, the fox. One thing Betty doesn't like, we had a lot of snakes.
The J Day, oddly enough, I had worked on the farm, and although I was only 11 or 12 years old when I got a job on the farm, and you had to be 14, why it was farm of one of my friends, and he was my age also, and we were told that if we worked on a potato picker, which was a new thing that had come out, and we were told that if anybody strange, any vehicles or what have you, we noticed them coming up a lot, to just jump off and make believe we were playing, because the guy's father didn't want to get in trouble.
We did a lot of local things. Went to the beach a lot, because since you had a car, Jones Beach was a major destination. And we went there, and of course, we took them over to Parkway, because that's when it was still open. And you'd have to go through the toll booth. Now, I don't remember we paid for it, but I remember riding through the toll booth, because with it very narrow. And we drove from Queens Village, where we got on the toll booths, on the motor parkway, and we got up in Ronkonkoma. And we went to a lot of those beaches in Ronkonkoma.
Okay, and Lake Ronkonkoma too, you're.
Well, at Lake Ronkonkoma,
Okay.
that's where the parkway ended.
Okay,
The motor parkway ended at Lake Ronkonkoma, and then you just drove right around the lake to the various pavilions. One of them was Jack Yerkes, and I don't know why I remember that name just now.
And plus, back then, there was no refrigerator, you had ice boxes. You know, so nothing kept very long, so you had to keep moving stuff. Every day the iceman would come and put a big block of ice in your thing. There was a drip pan, the kids had to do the drip pan every day, don't spill no water.
Fred is the guy who was talking about driving to Lake Ronkonkoma. His father, he was from Queens, his father actually worked for the city as a driver, so that's why they had a car. They didn't have to worry about the gas ration. And just a fun fact, this came up in some other research. The other people that were sort of exempt for gas rationing in the war were the photographers for Newsday, because they had to get to events, so they had some kind of special dispensation or access to the gasoline. So again, that's sort of a glimpse of what these people were experiencing in their early lives. And again, their parents would have been from around the turn of the century. So as we said, there's sort of a chain of memories. And so they're talking about, swimming holes. Some of them talking about swimming in Oakdale, Second Pond, and a lot of this farmland open road before Sunrise Highway was built. So again, we're capturing, even though we're talking about World War II mostly, we ask about their early life. And so we're capturing a lot of these other memories that are sort of adding to the history of Long Island. So those are the clips. What I would like to do, we have some time left, if you're all up for it. Again, this is sort of what we use to record these. And when we do an oral history, there's a whole set of ways that you do it that has grown up. So it's usually a one-on-one in a quiet space, so it wouldn't be in front of 30 people. But a few of you have come up and mentioned some memories of your own or that have been passed down to you. So I thought we would do a little demonstration. We'll record them. We'll put them on our podcast if that's right with everyone, but just as a way to get some more conversation going. And Jim, you had mentioned something. Do you mind being our first? Sure. So what I'm going to do is set up the microphones. I'm going to turn this buzz down. If you want to take this seat. Sure. And you had mentioned, wanting to record this. This is sort of a level up, but you could even there are apps for your iPhone if you wanted to start recording your own family memories. There are I think voice recorder app is a good one to use. So you don't need equipment like this. And it is, I would say, we would all agree now, it's important to get these memories while the people are still with us, because you never know. And you never know what story somebody has to tell. So that's why I'm glad Jim is going to. Give me 1 second.
Thanks.
Okay, do you want to say your name?
Sure. My name is Jim Connell, and for 30 years I was an industrial arts teacher in Bakewood schools. What I was telling him about my compatriots over there. When I first came to work out here in 1970, the wood shop in Bayport High School was an old facility. It had been built in the 1930s. In the basement, we had supplies, all kinds of supplies, woods, excellent. You can't believe the quality of some of it. But we had a stack of various, if you see back there, the silhouettes of all the aircraft. We had stacks and stacks of aircraft down below in that form. Japanese, German, Italian, United States, England, everybody. And what they were, that was a project for the industrial arts students during the war. They would get these silhouettes, and they were all in measured size, and they would make silhouette copies of the aircraft to be used for aircraft identification by gunners. And then they would send them off. They collect them from various high schools, and they would send them off to gunnery schools. It's very interesting. They were still here in the 70s. Unfortunately, when they rebuilt the shops over there about 25 years ago now, they threw all that stuff away. I went over and asked them if they'd keep it, but they said they couldn't. So it's unfortunate, but it's interesting because that's what the kids were doing in the high school, helping out the war effort.
Thank you. And I think some of our interviewees have mentioned, I think it was an Adopt a Fighter, they would write letters to fighter pilots. And it was like an Adopt a Fighter program, and they would basically become a pen pal. We've talked about, if you know, email, did they call it? So, you know, the mail back and forth was censored, so a lot of times you would get, you know, the messages would be struck out, or they would microfilm these things to get the bulk down, so they would microfilm all these letters, and so the email would come in with this very thin kind of, almost like a mimeographed copy. Ed, you were going to share something too? This is Ed Taylor from the Radio Historical Society. Ed, where did you grow up?
I grew up in the East Bronx.
Okay.
I don't know where all these people were riding around because gas was rationed. You had different stickers on the windshield. I think the A sticker gave you maybe 3 gallons a week. The B sticker, I think, was if maybe you were in business and you had to use it to make deliveries or something of that sort. And there was a C sticker, I think that was unlimited if maybe you had some government work. I remember the blackout curtains, and I remember the air raid warden wearing a white tin hat, and he had a key that he used to use to turn out the street lights, because why would you want the street lights on in an air raid? And the top floors, there were apartment houses, although we lived in a private house, at my grandfather's private house. The top floors in the apartment houses were empty because they were afraid a bomb was going to fall. But if a bomb fell, I think it would take out more than just the top floor. And the doing away with locally here with paper bags and plastic bags, that also reminds me of the war years because there were no bags at the stores, and I think plastic bags weren't even invented yet. And I remember my mother taking some very, very old curtains and making some bags. And we would use that when we went shopping. And we had to go with our ration book because especially sugar, coffee, other items, meat was rationed. Shoes were rationed. I think you were only allowed 3 pairs a year. Of course, gasoline being rationed, there was no one parked on the street. But there was something in the paint stores called benzene. It was used as a paint thinner, or also used maybe to degrease something. And I don't know what octane benzene was, but a lot of people would buy a gallon of benzene and add it to whatever little gasoline they had in the car to make it go further. And there were people that didn't use their ration books for gasoline, so sometimes they'd give you, or you had to buy it from them, the rations for gasoline. I remember also saving a lot of things. I think people saved fat that they brought back to the butcher. They saved bones that they brought back to the butcher. I don't know, for some reason they saved string and rubber bands. I don't know what they were going to do with it. But cigarettes used to come with some kind of tin foil on the inside. And you'd rip away all the paper and you'd find maybe an old pack on the street that someone threw away, and you'd rip away the paper and you'd keep on saving that tin foil. And when you had a big ball of tin foil, you could take it to the junkyard. I don't know what they paid you for it. But we didn't know that times were bad. I think it was some very interesting times. The radio, of course, was very, very important to listen to at night what was happening in Europe. And being in the Long Island Radio and Television Historical Society, I'd just like to give you one fact that was kept secret during the entire war. Now, I guess you were able to keep secrets then. There was a radio system called Loran. I believe it's stood for long-range aid to navigation. And they hopped from island to island, not so much navigating on compass and maps, but on this radio system. And most people don't know, when the two bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, were dropped on Japan, they did not navigate there by compass and map. They navigated there by this electronic Loran system, and they were right on the money. The system was kept secret until after the war. After the war, it became known, and a lot of the boaters used the Loran system to navigate. This was before GPS. And that's all I have to say at the moment.
Thank you. And actually, I think one of our early members was involved in that Loran project, right?
Yes.
Field?
We had one of our members, I'm trying to think of his name, Van Field.
Yep.
Van Field was in the, he was in the Coast Guard, we know, but I think he had some other job other than just being a Coast Guard member. Van Field would go from island to island, setting up these radio Loran transmitters until we finally got to Japan.
So again, another sort of hidden story that hopefully can come out. Anyone else interested in sharing maybe a tidbit or a story or two? Not mandatory. So let me turn this off first of all. So we have a few more things. Just again to repeat, and I'll put the website up here. If you're interested, or you know someone that's interested, or you have a family member you would like to make interested, there's a handout by our radio on the way out, which is our contact information. Again, we can come to you. So if you have someone that you think, again, grew up or was living on Long Island in the 40s and would be interested and willing to tell some stories about their life, we would definitely like to add them to this collection. We want to expand it as much as we can. We're doing more activities like this to bring it out in the open. We're finding that the population we're looking for is not necessarily on Twitter and Facebook, so sending the message out that way is not the way to get to them. It's more explaining to them face to face. So we're grateful that you all came out today. If you go to, this is the nationalhomefrontproject.org, so I'll leave this site up. This is where the full interviews are up now with the pictures, so that's, and you can also look around. There are other partners. I mentioned this is a regional effort, so the Newark Public Library is doing it. There are people down in Florida with their stories, so you get a nice cross-section of the country as you're doing that. But before we leave, I want to invite up Sayville and Steph, if you want to come up too. We don't have all of our interviewees here with us today, but we would like to acknowledge the ones that are here, and we would, Jim, do you want to do the others? So as we call your name, if you would want to make your way forward, and we just have a, would we have
In both, we're giving a certificate of contribution, okay, and a contributor badge for our folks. So Jack Beebe.
Thank you.
yes.
And we also have Marie Mack. As a family?
Yes.
Okay. We have Rhoda McManus. All right, and we have Marie McLaughlin.
Thank you very much.
All right, and we have,
I think, I don't know if that's everyone that's here.
okay, all right.
So again, we appreciate you all coming out. Hopefully this either brought back good memories or added to your own knowledge of the area in World War II. Please share this site and this project with people you think might be interested. We're trying to work with the high school, get some of them involved. I didn't put clips together, but a lot of our interviewees, you know, we talk about what the next generation should know about this time, and there's different levels of, you know, hopefulness about how much people know about it already, or what level of interest. So we want to try to build a level of interest to show the younger generation that there is a lot of interesting things that went on this time. It's not just what you might see on the History Channel or
And just
they
to-
know this history.
and just to add one thought to Chris's, the way this setup is, we could also take this, if you contact us, that there's a community center where there's a number of members there. We could, you know, this setup, in other words, we can take it on the road, if you will,
Sure. Yep.
and take it to you. So this was a tremendous turnout today, and I want to thank you all for coming. Our Historical Society, next, beginning in April, we have a personal history of a son's remembrances of his father, and with Teddy Roosevelt. And at the end of April, we actually have a Grumman program, where we will talk about the F-14 program and a lot of the things that are there. And that is also certainly a part of our local history. So thank you all for coming today, and I hope you enjoyed this.